Hello, good afternoon. Am I audible? I hope you guys can hear me. So I just enabled chat, so everyone should be able to ask questions. You can type it in, and you can also use the Q&A function in Zoom. By the way, today's topic, I have a couple. So the first one would be EnGenius Private Cloud Solution, or EPC. So some of you may have already heard of it. It's a new controller option for the cloud, so that you can have or I would say tackle more verticals. For example, if you have a client that wants to use the cloud system or the cloud features, but they want it to be on-prem, meaning they're managing it on their own data center, maybe on their own server, for privacy and all that. So this would be an option. So another topic later on is a new addition to the EnGenius Cloud portfolio. So we have a new set of devices for EnGenius Cloud. So more on that later. So first is EPC, or EnGenius Private Cloud. So, like I mentioned, so EnGenius Private Cloud is our option for clients who need something on premise, but they want to use the same cloud equipment. For example, ECW 230, ECW 230S, or Wi-Fi 7 models. Let's say you have clients that are looking for this, maybe banks, the government, or a school who wants to host a controller themselves. But yeah, maybe they are not able to use the cloud because of certain limitations, maybe ISP limitations or internal policies that they have. Maybe they're not allowed to use cloud controlled equipment. So with EPC, this can unlock those clients for you. So they'd be able to manage the same cloud devices, the access points, the switches, and our switch extenders using their own managed controller. So the controller is Linux based, is Docker based. So they can have this hosted on a server, a PC, or maybe their data center, or maybe on another cloud system that they're privately managing. Main difference between EnGenius Cloud and EPC is the number of devices you can manage. So with the current version that we have, or upon launch, the EPC would be able to handle about 3,000 devices. So that's a mix of access point switches as well. But later on, we'll be updating the software once we have it finalized to support up to 10,000 devices. Another difference is the number of admins that you can manage, or number of admins or team members that you can add to manage your networks. Right now, under EnGenius Cloud, you can have up to 10 admins per network. If you're using the Pro license, there's no limit on the number of admins that you can use. For EPC or EnGenius Private Cloud, you can have 100 admins per EPC server. And then we also will be supporting API for EPC, as well as license options too. So similar to the cloud, we're going to have a basic and pro license for EPC, depending on the features that you activate. So I'll talk more about that later on. When it comes to security, privacy, and reliability, so it's the same across the board. So on EnGenius Cloud, whenever the device talks to the server, we have a secure tunnel which uses MFA, or multi-factor authentication, so that nobody can hack into the cloud service and nobody can hack into the device. So same thing if you're managing the EPC. So with the EPC, if you're hosting on your server, whenever the device communicates to the controller, we still have that same authentication method, that same security tunnel. It's just an added bonus that since you're hosting the server yourself, you have more control on the server itself. You can control, let's say, the firewall. You can control or limit the communication that goes back and forth. So, but across the board, it's the same type of management. Let's say you want to add a device, you just have to key in the serial number, and then afterwards the device would go online and you can continue to manage it. So security is there and reliability is intact. In terms of redundancy, I will talk about in a while. We have several redundancy options for EPC as well. So the target verticals for the EPC, or EnGenius Private Cloud, are ISP, MSPs, those that really have to host the controllers themselves. Most MSPs or ISPs would have it hosted on their data center, so they have full control, full network control. Let's say, for example, they want to manually set everything, communication path between device to controller and all that. So usually they would have this on their server. Another vertical that can make use of this solution is government. the government and military, depending on the region. So some government institutions are still not open to the cloud service. Maybe they'd still want something that they can keep on their own, or maybe because of tenancy. It depends on the situation. And then another sector is finance. Finance. Or let's say, for example, for the banks, usually they would want everything secured. The IT manager, MIS, they want to control everything. Firewall, input and output of your server, all that. So with the EPC, they can control all of those since they're managing the server themselves for the devices. So when it comes to customer behavior, so there are a lot of laws in terms of privacy. So depending on the region, maybe you have GDPR, HIPPA, or FISMA. So with that in mind, so if you're hosting the EPC yourself, you can have or you can fully take care of the privacy of your network. You can control on who accesses the server. You can maintain it properly. So everything would be taken care of by the client. If, for example, some client requests, for instance, certifications such as PCI DSS or ISO certifications, IEC 27001, other privacy controls and auditing. So these can be applied by the client too. So we have this on the cloud, but if the client wants to manage this themselves, they can do so as well using the EPC. So right now, most of the clients are also starting to shift to other cloud services, let's say AWS, Azure, or Google services. But some clients still prefer to have on-prem management. For them, it's easier to do it on-prem. They would not have to worry about any licensing costs or leasing. Essentially, they just install the server, install the software, and then plug the devices in, and that's it. Some clients would have to or would want to manage it that way on a basic level. So the supported product line for the EPC would be on the launch. We have the AB Sense switches, so that's compatible right now. The switch extenders would be compatible in the future. For the rest of our products, we may not be able to bring it on EPC because of the dependency on the cloud. For example, for our gateway, the ESG, we have the auto mesh function or auto VPN. So auto VPN, auto mesh, when they link to each other, they would rely on the cloud service because the cloud would have to tell the gateway where the peers are and all that. So it needs to be connected to the internet 24/7. We may not be able to bring the gateway to the EPC in the future, but we'll still check on this. So the future model, like the cloud camera, NVS, as well as the PDUs, are also right now only available on EnGenius Cloud as well. Now, like I mentioned, the EPC that we have is currently Linux based. So it can be installed on any Docker service. So it's going to be very light for the system. It's not resource intensive. And it's very efficient in terms of how it runs. So the main requirement is that you need to have at least Ubuntu 20.04 or Debian 10.6. If you guys want to test out the EPC, we can share a beta file to you guys. So just let our country reps know, and then they can give you an installation guide on how it runs. Now, when it comes to scalability, like I mentioned, right now we support 3,000 devices for the current version of the EPC, but we will expand this to 10,000 device management in the future as well. So here are the spec requirements for the EPC. By the way, we have a lot of clients asking whether we support ARM or Raspberry Pi. So unfortunately, right now it's only available for install on Intel-based VMs as well as AMD-based systems. Now, for the user interface, I think I'll go through the EPC that I have in a while. So it's the familiar feel that you have with the EnGenius Cloud. So you have the same familiar menus. If you guys played around with the EnGenius FitCon before or Fit Controller, you can see that it almost looks the same in terms of navigation. So let me share my EPC in a bit. Wait, let me open it. Okay, so you can see from here that once you open EnGenius Private Cloud or EPC, you'd have the same familiar dashboard that you have with EnGenius Cloud. So you would see your hierarchy views. You can create multiple networks and multiple subfolders here. You can also create multiple organizations. So this is something that we added here so that it would be almost the same as what you have for EnGenius Cloud. So you can create multiple orgs and then subfolders, and then under that, you can create multiple networks. So at a glance, you would have your summary overview, AP switches, if you have switch extenders that would display here as well. And then you would have your throughput information and all that. So you'd have the same SSID configuration as with the cloud, like I mentioned, the EPC would have licensing as well. So for the pro features that we have on the cloud, you can enable that here under the EPC as well. For example, we have dynamic client pooling, IPSK, and then the enterprise authentication options too. Like for example, Google LDAP, um, Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Active Directory are supported as well. So the same thing applies for captive portal. You have that scheduling, access control. This has the latest updates on the cloud too. So you have your VIP list, block list. You also have your white list or allow list. So when we release updates in the cloud, of course, we'll be releasing that update to work with EPC as well, so long as it's not dependent on cloud access. So some other features that you have, the radio settings you can tweak. You have your client balancing, you have your mesh radios, you can configure that here as well. We haven't added support for the Wi-Fi 7 radio set for the version that I'm using, but we'll bring that in as well so that you can manage the Wi-Fi 7 devices here. So the tri-band AP ECW336 with 6E, as well as the Wi-Fi 7 APs with 6 gigahertz. So that would be compatible here as well on launch or when we once we release the EPC. For the firmware upgrade, you have full control, so you can manually upload the firmware and then select the schedule yourself. So that means if you don't put any firmware here, your system would not be updated. So that's one of the requests from our clients when using EnGenius Cloud. They want something to they want to disable firmware upgrades. So recently we added a freeze firmware upgrade on the cloud. So here on EPC, if you don't want the devices to auto update, you just have to not upload a new firmware on the system. So team member management is still here. You can easily invite members, add them to your network as a viewer or admin. Yeah, I don't have much data on this EPC right now. But yeah, you can manage your switches, you can do your alerts, you can customize your email alerts. So for email alerts, since this one is not connected to the cloud, all you need to do is tie in your email account here, key in your SMTP server, your port, and then where you want to send the email to. And then from there, if you have alerts on the cloud, so the system will send you an email based on the email address that you have keyed in right here. Yeah, for the full list of features for the EPC, maybe later on I'll share the PPT file to our country reps. So if you need it, you can get it from them. Yeah, so I talked about redundancy earlier. So with the EPC, we have multiple redundancy or failover options. For instance, if you want to have a backup, let's say for example EPC-A, and then your backup is EPC-B. If for example server A crashes, immediately ECP-B would go live, so that you can use it as a backup. You would have minimum or less downtime. One of our failover options is with the license key assignment and device registration, so that if your server crashes, you will need to have to re-register all those APs again. They will just be mirrored to a backup server. If you want the backup configuration, we can do that as well through the EPC. So backing up configuration on the EPC can be directly on the cloud service. So we would require a backup license for that. But all configuration on your EPC would be stored on the cloud. So that means if your server crashes, let's say you build another server, you can just download those configuration from the cloud and restore it on your EPC. So that would also contain information on your device registration and all that. And then we also support HA for the EPC. So that means we have two servers running simultaneously, one acting as redundancy. So in any point that EPCA, let's say, loses internet connectivity or crashes, you can immediately go to EPC without any downtime at all. So the redundancy between these two servers would be in real time. So we also support remote management through the EPC. So that would be leveraging our Fit Register server. So if you are familiar with our Fit Solutions, Fit Controller, you can manage remote devices through Fit Register. So same thing with the EnGenius Private Cloud or EPC. Whenever you have devices across the internet on a different site, all you need to do is register their serial number, and then the Fit register would recognize them and tie them to a specific EPC where it belongs to. So when that device goes online, it will find your controller, and then from there it will go active. You'd be able to monitor and manage as usual. So EPC doesn't mean local management. You can also do remote management using the EPC. In terms of the licensing structure, let me hide this button for a while. So we have several licenses for EPC. If you need just a basic Wi-Fi service, similar to basic license on the cloud, wherein you don't have to pay anything, you can do that for local management and device configuration. Let's say you just need MyPSK, or you just need maybe a simple Wi-Fi service with hotspot. So you can do that by just installing the software and registering the access points. But if you need to, let's say, for example, do remote management or make use of the other functions such as redundancy system, that's where the licenses come in. Or maybe the pro functions on the cloud. Maybe you want to use Azure Active Directory integration or authentication. So that's where these licenses come in. So to connect the EPC on EnGenius Cloud, we have the EPC Connect. And then when you want to use the Pro devices on the cloud, we have the Pro license. So depending on what you need on the service, or depending on what the end user requires, the license for EPC would be modular, I should say. So if they need a backup service, we have the license there, or if they need redundancy, or if they need to use the MSP portal. So the MSP portal will also be available in the future for the EPC. So if you need to learn more information about the licensing, you may contact our sales reps. So just a quick rundown on what is available for EPC. So most of the functions are available under the basic license. So you have your auto firm upgrade, you have your device configuration stored on the controller, MSP portal in the future, you have your OW encryption, Wi-Fi 7 radios, almost all of the authentication options for which is available on the cloud. So OWE, open encryption, WPA2, WPA3, and then enterprise options, custom radius. You have your Azure AD, Active Directory, and Google LDAP as well. Now, for the pro features that is available on the EPC, this is the full list. Yeah, I'll just share this file to you guys so you have a copy. By the way, the current version that I have right now is 1.6.9. So upon release, it's going to be version 1.7. So version 1.7 supports, if I'm not mistaken, all of these already, including the Wi-Fi 7 access points too. Tentative release for the EPC, it's going to be available on roughly mid to end of December. But if you want to test the beta version right now, which is what I have, so just contact us so that we can share the installation guide. Any questions before I move over to the next topic? Oh, sorry. I'm not seeing the Q&A function here right now in Zoom. Wait a minute. Okay, yeah. One question here. Can we manage both cloud and Fit series device on EPC? Right now, EPC is designed only for the cloud models, so that means the ECW access points, all the ECW access points, 215, 220, 230, the security models and the Wi-Fi 7 models as well, and then all of the EnGenius Cloud switches as well. So ECS from um 5112 FP up to the multi-gig and 10G switches as well. Another question here is the EPC only running on VM? Any hardware version for the EPC? So at the moment, we only have the VM version on launch. Maybe in the future, we can think about the hardware version if you guys really require it. But yeah, upon launch, it's going to be available only as a VM version or Docker-based version. Can we add Fit controller to EPC or EnGenius Cloud? So right now, the Fit controller cannot be added to EPC or EnGenius Cloud, but you can add Fit controller under Fit Express for remote management. Okay, another question here is backup available in EPC and EC and GS Cloud models without license? So right now, the backup function for EnGenius Cloud or EPC is not available without a license. But so long as you have the controller active, all your configuration is stored on the controller. So for example, if you reset the device or somebody factory resets the unit, so long as it can sync back to the controller, all the previous configuration would be restored. So the backup option, we usually use this for having, let's say, redundancy. Maybe some of your team members mess up with the settings. You want to restore to your original config. You can do so with a backup. So can also use a backup function to clone the network so that it's easier to set up multiple networks with the same configuration. One question here. Where is the map view function under EPC? Are there any old features that will no longer be available? So the map view, as of the moment, the map view function, as well as the obstacle plotting under EnGenius Cloud, would be a feature that is exclusive to the cloud right now. I'm not sure if the team will bring this as well on the EPC, but upon launch, the map view function will not be available for EPC. So it's only going to be available for EnGenius Cloud. Another question? Yeah, this is very important. So, will the EPC work without internet? Yes. So, the EPC can be managed fully, and you can control your devices fully even without internet service. So long as your devices can communicate to the EPC, they would be able to, you'd be able to monitor and manage your devices even without internet service. Does the EPC support HA or high availability? So yes, we do support EPC HA. I'm not sure if it's going to be available on the December launch or later on early next year, but we do support HA. So the way the HA works is, for example, you have two EPCs, A and B. It would be real-time redundancy. So you can access A or you can access B. If A goes down, you can quickly access B without having to have any downtime. Your APs will still remain to be online, clients will remain connected. So you would have zero downtime using EPC HA. Does the EPC support EXSI? So long as the EXSI can use or install Linux with Docker, it should be okay. So not directly through EXSI or not directly through maybe a Windows environment, but so long as you have the required operating system, Debian and Ubuntu, with the versions listed earlier, you should be able to install it without any issue. All right, guys. So if you have further questions, just type it in. I will go through it later on. So for now, let me go over to the next topic, which is the ECW Lite APs. So I think for most of you, you've only heard this right now. Maybe some of our listeners have already heard of it. But we are launching a new lineup for EnGenius Cloud, which is the ECW Lite. So the ECW Lite would be our cost-effective model range for EnGenius Cloud. So right now we have two solutions for EnGenius. We have EnGenius Cloud and EnGenius Fit. So some of our clients are using EnGenius Fit for basic services, but we still have a lot of requests from clients. They're requesting a full cloud solution. Maybe they already have clients that are using, let's say, the ECW 220, but then for specific areas, maybe for a pantry or for another area, they want a low cost model just for basic Wi-Fi. So if they install Fit on that scenario, that means that they would have to work with two different controllers or two different solutions. So for some clients, it's a bit of a hassle. So with the release of ECW Lite, this allows you to have a single management pane for everything that you're managing. So you have your high-end models, you have your low-cost models, you have your switching, you have your future cameras and all that. Went out. Let me check real quick. Yeah, I think it's still okay. Okay, yeah. So ECW Lite. So this is for end users or clients with budget concerns. Maybe you have clients that need just general Wi-Fi, or maybe your client just needs to deploy a couple, one or two more. Hold on. Okay, yeah, I think now it's okay. You guys can hear me? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so ECW Lite is for that function. Maybe your client just need to add one or two more APs that maybe they don't have any more budget to add another ECW 220. Maybe for this area, they just need a simple Wi-Fi so they can have the ECW Lite there. So same with the cloud. Same with the rest of our solution. The ECW Lite can be managed all together with the rest of our cloud models, ECW Gateway, Switch, and PDUs. So we also support pro licensing if you need to use some pro functions for the light version. But I think for most of the clients, just the basic function is okay. So we support most of the basic functions for ECW Lite, except for a few advanced one. Let me go over to the next slide. Yeah, so the ECW Lite supports all the basic functions that we have right now on a normal ECW model, except for some advanced functions, which are not that commonly used by clients. For example, Hotspot 2.0, most wireless ISPs or ISPs would use this. It's for offloading from cellular to Wi-Fi. And then RadSec, this is a form of radius encryption, and then we have VLAN by Radius, but the rest are supported under ECW Lite. Let's say, for example, diagnostic tools. You have your map view, your topology view. You have your heat map function. Um, all of that are supported under ECW Lite. So let me go over the other features as well. So the ECW Lite also supports pro licensing. There are some features that are not supported due to the restriction on the hardware to make it more cost effective. For example, the amount of data stored is the same. You can view 30 days worth of data under the ECW Lite. For the Lite model, you can have a maximum of 100 for voucher service and cloud radios. For the block list is the same as well. You can have 100 maximum for your VIP list, whitelist, or block list. So I'll talk more about that later on. So the rest of the features are supported under the ECW Lite Pro as well. For example, backup and restore, cloning the network, live client list, exporting your client list, API integration. If your clients are using third-party software to monitor or maybe manage, excuse me, to manage the Wi-Fi, maybe they have integration with third-party PMS. so that when the guest checks in, it's automatically going to create a user for the client. So we can do that as well under the ECW Lite. AV Express, which we just released a couple of weeks ago. So this is also available for ECW Lite, as well as the live diagnostic tools to make it a lot easier for troubleshooting. For the ECW Lite lineup, we're starting off with the ECW 210L. So this is a 2x2 Wi-Fi 6 access point. It can support a maximum of 128 concurrent clients. And then for the, sorry, I think this is an error. It's supposed to be 128 per radio. So overall, for the access point, 256 clients supported per access point. So here, 2x2 Lite, this is Wi-Fi 6 access point, supports 256 clients per AP, 128 per radio. We have a 4x4 Lite that has a 2.5G LAN to maximize the wireless speed. So this also supports 256 clients per access point. And then later this year, correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy, or maybe early next year, we'll be releasing a Cloud 7 model as well for ECW Lite series. So this would be our most, I would say, cost-effective Wi-Fi 7 model to be released. So it's a 2x3x3 model. That means on your 2.4 radio, it's running 2x2. For 5 gigahertz, it's running 3x3, and then for 6 gigahertz, it's going to be running 3x3 as well. So for these two models, ECW 210L and ECW 212L, they are available right now. Okay, so common question. So since the ECW Lite can be managed online, that means I can manage them all together and the same way with my ECW series. For example, let's say I already have ECW 220. Maybe I have 10, 20, 30 of them. And then I just want to add one more model, which is the ECW Lite. So if I add a 210L, would that conflict with my existing system? Since there are some differences in terms of the functions. So, for instance, in terms of mesh, the normal cloud model would only be able to mesh with other cloud models too. Like for example, 220. Let's say I would call them the OG cloud models. So OG cloud models 220, 220S, 230, 230S, and Wi-Fi 7 models. You can only mesh this with the same series. So when it comes to the L models or the light models, they also have mesh, but they can also mesh with other light models too. So that would avoid conflicts in terms of managing them on the system. So what if, for example, I enable an SSID? Let's say I have Azure authentication on my ECW 230. So I'm using this for authentication for the campus. But then I want to add another model of that campus which doesn't have this authentication. So what if I'm grouping all of these APs together in a single network? So most of the time, I would recommend to separate the network management to make it easier. But if you have clients that happen to manage them under the same network, there wouldn't be conflicts, but there would be differences on the SSIDs. So for example, SSID 1, let's say this is where I have my Azure authentication. On my 230, my clients would be able to see SSID 1. They would be able to connect and authenticate to Azure. But on my ECW Lite model, it would not display because it doesn't support Azure. So let's say, for example, multiple SSIDs, one has Azure and then 2 to 6 serves other functions. If the Lite model supports those functions, they would appear on your AP and activate. But the SSID that is not supported by the Lite model would be disabled automatically. So it's not going to be broadcasting. Your clients would not experience any error because from that AP, the system would automatically disable it to avoid conflicts or errors. And then there's also the difference with the whitelist and blocklist. So for example, for my OG models, the 230, I can have 1,000 whitelisted devices there. But for the light models, the cap is 100 because of the hardware. So what would happen in that situation is that the first 100 entries would be recognized by the light models. Succeeding entries from 101 to 1000 would only be recognized by the OG models, the 230. So in that situation where you have, let's say, for example, differences in terms of your whitelisting or cloud users, I would suggest to just separate the light models into another network so you can easily create that on the cloud so that you wouldn't be confused with the entries. But yeah, from the system, the cloud light models would be reading the ones that it support. For example, the 100 entries for the Mac, because that's all stored on the AP. Is not actually on the cloud. So when you, for example, add a block list, whitelist, so that's stored on the device itself in memory. So the device would recognize that even if you don't have internet connection, if you lost cloud connection, it would know that, hey, this MAC address is blocked, so I would disallow entry from the system. So all that is on the physical memory of the unit. So yeah, availability for Cloud-Lite. The Wi-Fi 6 models are available right now. Wi-Fi 7 models would be released later on. Do you have any questions on the Lite models? So one question here about the Lite voucher service. So for the voucher service on the Lite Pro, 100 means you can run 100 vouchers a day. So here, the 100 voucher limit would mean similar to the basic license that we have in the cloud. That means that you can have 100 simultaneous vouchers created that clients can use. It depends on your setup, how many people can use that voucher. For example, I can create a voucher and limit it to a single user, or I can create a voucher with no limit on the number of the users. So it doesn't matter how many users connect. All that matters is the vouchers that you have created on the system. So if you have 100 vouchers and 1,000 users, that's okay. But you wouldn't be able to create 101 voucher. So the cap is 100 for the light model. Can you please explain again about meshing in the light models? Oh, yeah, sure. So for the mesh, to make it easier and avoid conflicts on the hardware, the light models can only mesh with the light models too. For example, 210L with 210L or 210L with the Wi-Fi 7 model, so they can mesh together. And the original models, the 220, 230, and so on, they can only mesh with themselves as well. So indoor or outdoor, they can mesh together, but light and OG models won't be able to mesh with each other. So light to light meshing and original to original model meshing only. What's the difference between? Sorry, let me scroll up. I think I skipped some questions. Wanted to know about hotspots, vouchers with timely manner. I think you are referring to vouchers that expire. So yeah, you can set that up on the system. So you can create a voucher and set a duration. For example, how many days is this voucher valid, or how many hours? So you can set that on the system. Fast roaming on both ECW and ECW Lite. So yeah, roaming works across the board. So if you have roaming enabled on Fit and Lite, and you want your clients, wireless clients, to freely roam without disconnection from your Lite to original model, so they could do so. They could roam between the two. What's the difference between ECW Lite and Fit? So the main difference between the two is how you manage, and some of the features are different as well. For EnGenius Fit, we have three controller options. We have standalone, we have the EnGenius Fit Express, the app-based management and web-based as well. And then we have Fit Controller, the hardware-based box. So this is what you use to manage the Fit devices. So there are some features that are only available under the cloud, which are not available in Fit. So the ECW Lite would have almost all the basic functions that we have on the current cloud system. Plus, you can manage it on the cloud as well. For the ECW Lite models, by the way, you can also manage this using the EnGenius Cloud to Go app. Another question here, if we have a Pro license and using mixed ECW and ECW Lite series, how can the vouchers work? I mean, due to the limitation of 100 users and the 10,000. So there's a difference between the limit on the ECW Lite models. Wait, hold on, let me go back a few screens. Yeah, because of the difference on the hardware itself, the Lite Pro model can only manage 100 vouchers. Sorry, the Lite Pro and the Lite Basic. So Basic or Pro, you can manage 100 vouchers under Pro, while we're in SE on ECW Pro, the normal one, you can have 10,000. So what would happen in this system is that the ECW Lite would only read the first 100 entries. So entries exceeding 100 cannot be read by the Lite model. So in that situation, if let's say you have over 100 vouchers and you are already using this with the ECW Pro, I would suggest to separate the Lite Pro network to avoid confusion on the vouchering of the system. So thank you, Nancy. She mentioned that the ECW 516 Lite, the Wi-Fi 7 model, is going to be available in January. Yeah, question here, ECW Lite management, is it on a separate cloud portal? ECW Lite can be managed on the same exact portal that you have for EnGenius Cloud, so that you can easily manage them together under a single pane. So this is the common, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our clients have common issues when their clients want to use a more cost-effective model for certain areas, maybe the guardhouse, or in areas wherein there's not much clients. They just need to install a quick Wi-Fi service, but they don't want a separate management platform. So the ECW Lite is a good addition to be able to solve those kinds of issues. So it's the same portfolio that you have. You can manage it all together on the same monitoring system too. So your suggestion might be to have two separate networks on between ECW Lite and ECW to avoid limitations. Yeah, it depends on the scenario. Maybe if you're not using, maybe if you have a voucher system, but you only are using 100 vouchers, there's no need to separate the two models because they would function exactly the same way. But if you are using over 100 vouchers, or you are using, let's say, um, more than 100 blacklist or whitelist, that's the time that maybe we need to separate the two to make it easier to manage them. But in most cases, you wouldn't really have to separate them. Is the warranty the same as the OG ECW? So yeah, it is the same. So it's the same warranty service. You just have to inquire with our country reps or our distributors for that. But yeah, whatever warrant hardware warranty we have with existing models is the same for the ECW Lite. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Nancy, do you want to add any information? Yeah, I think Nancy's good. If you guys have any other additional questions regarding Cloud-Lite or the EPC, so just let us know. You can let our country reps know so that we can revert to you with those questions. By the way, this webinar is recorded. Yeah, luckily I hit the record button. So is recorded. This would be available under EnGenius Academy in a couple of weeks' time. And within the week, I will upload it on our EnGenius APAC YouTube page as well. So yeah, if no further questions, that's it for today's webinar session. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.